Thank you all for taking the time to look at this presentation. My data visualization focuses on using growth data recorded in tree rings to investigate how tree growth varies across space and time. Before I get to the visualization, I just wanted to provide a short primer on the dataset I worked with. The data I used were collected in 2010 at the North Unit of Theodore Roosevelt National Park in North Dakota, shown in this map. Tree cores were taken from cottonwood trees across the floodplain, and an example of what this looked like is shown in this second figure. An increment borer, essentially a hollow drill, is inserted into the tree to remove a core. Once we have those cores, we take them back to the lab, sand them down, and use a microscope to count the rings. In this picture, the ring boundaries have been marked in a gray pencil in the middle of the core. This process of assigning calendar dates to each growth ring of a tree is known as Dendrochronology. Once we have confirmed our dating is correct on all trees, we measure the ring widths for every tree and average them to create a chronology of growth for the entire site. This shows us how tree growth evolves over time at this site, which we can then compare to various climatic variables. In this case, previous research demonstrated that cottonwood growth responds significantly to spring flows. Using this regression, flows were reconstructed to before the instrumental record, allowing us to develop a more complete history of this river. This methodology is all well established in dendrochronology. What is less understood is how growth of individual trees varies across space and time. So I developed an animation to help answer these questions from publicly available tree ring and hydrologic data. The tree ring data for my project is brought to you by Populus deltoides subspecies monilifera, the plains cottonwood. If you grew up in the western U.S., you're likely familiar with this riparian tree. Many cottonwood species are children of the river and are uniquely adapted to life on floodplains. Their seeds have very little stored energy, and so saplings must establish free of competition on bare mineral soil. The new surfaces created by rivers provide those ideal conditions for germination and establishment. And cottonwoods have learned to time their seed release to coincide with high flow events. You can see in this image the different age cohorts of cottonwoods that have established as the Little Missouri River has moved. An individual cottonwood tree is impressive in its own right, and you can see its size compared to an average person. There's nothing quite like being under the shade cast by the tree's many triangular-shaped leaves and resting near its deeply furrowed bark on a hot and dry summer day. So now I'd like to show you a movie, but let's first set the scene. The year is 1776. On the other side of the continent, the Founding Fathers are in the process of signing the Declaration of Independence. But along what will eventually be known as the Little Missouri River, we have a stand of cottonwood trees doing what they've done since they were seedlings: grow. I would like to show you how the growth of this forest has changed across space and time on the Little Missouri River floodplain from 1776 to 2009. In this image, each dot on the floodplain represents an individual tree. The color of that dot indicates the growth of that tree in a given year, as indicated by the graduated scale in the bottom left. Trees in shades of red had reduced growth in a particular year, and trees in shades of blue experienced increased growth. The 10 dots you see here are most of what's left of the trees that were alive in 1776. This group also boasts the oldest known Populus deltoides ever sampled, which established in 1646, making it over 370 years old today. Most of these dots will be red to begin the presentation because, whereas the faster growing trees tend to live fast and die young, the oldest trees tend to be the slowest growing. In the top right, we have the current year. This year corresponds to the red ball you see in the green time series on the bottom right. Whereas the color of each dot is the growth of each individual tree, the time series is the average growth for all trees in a given year. As you can see, the line takes a dip in 1776, indicating this year was not great for the trees. So now let's see how tree growth evolves over time. Pay attention to how the growth of individual trees differs in each year, and how that growth compares to the average growth of all trees on the green line. The movie isn't terribly exciting right now, because much of the forest that existed at this time has long since died and decayed. As the movie plays, you will see new dots appear as younger trees get established on the floodplain. From 1818 to 1823, we will see one of the worst droughts experienced in this region from the cottonwoods perspective. As you can tell by the dark red hue of all dots across the floodplain, growth was severely reduced at this time. The low moisture from this period is confirmed by other tree ring chronologies and by Lakota winter counts, which referred to 1818 and 1819 as the sand-blowing years. Understanding the variability of droughts that occurred before the instrumental record helps those who have a vested interest in the water of the Little Missouri River to prepare and plan accordingly. When we investigate the response of individual trees to the conditions in a given year, researchers can use movies such as these to begin to ask questions such as, are some locations on the floodplain more impacted by drought than others? Is there a relationship between spatial position on the floodplain and tree growth? From the standpoint of dendrochronology, the answers to these questions are not very well understood, but can have important implications for site selection and building chronologies for climate reconstructions. For those with a vested interest in the health of these trees, it is crucial to understand how different parts of the forest will be affected by drought. This is especially true at the Little Missouri, where flows have been steadily declining in recent decades. If we know which trees are most affected by drought, we can monitor them and use them as a proxy for the overall health of the forest. Now we are really beginning to see the structure of the forest as it appears today, as one of the largest cohorts of trees established between the 1860s and 1880s. Look out for where new groups of trees begin to appear on the floodplain. You may have noticed that one thing the movie does not account for is channel movement. Currently, the background for these trees is the present-day floodplain. In reality, rivers move and the floodplain is extremely dynamic as the river erodes older surfaces and creates new ones. If you look closely on the floodplain, you can see evidence of the river's wild history, including evidence of a meander bend that was cut off. Some areas in this image are still devoid of trees, such as this point bar in the upper left-hand side. This is because the channel eroded the previous surface, and the surface you see now is younger than the other parts of the floodplain. In subsequent editions of this movie, it will be possible to add channel polygons digitized from aerial imagery to show where the channel was at certain points in time since the 1900s. And finally, we are getting to my favorite part of the movie, where I can begin to show you how cottonwood growth responds to changes in flow. As I showed at the start of this presentation, growth of trees along this river proved to be strongly correlated to spring flows. You'll be able to immediately see how this forest responds to low flows in 1931, 1934, and 1936. Of course, these years may stand out in your mind because they were some of the worst years of the Dust Bowl and changed the lives of many in the U.S. Well, it turns out it had an effect on the trees too. As I said at the beginning, the motivation for this movie was to investigate spatial patterns of growth in individual trees. Do you notice any patterns in high and low flow years? Given how correlated cottonwood growth is to stream flow, we might expect that trees higher above and farther from the current channel would grow less than trees along the riverbank. Shockingly, we don't see that, even when we normalize growth per year. This suggests that variation in growth over space is more complicated than at first glance, and work needs to be done to understand this relationship. Using movies such as these, we can easily convey this mystery and make it easier for people to visualize the effects of river discharge and climate on an entire forest. I hope to apply the same visualization to many other sites in dendrochronology and discover patterns not immediately evident in the data. As we finish up, I would just like to thank you for taking the time to watch and consider this movie of tree growth.